Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. Today we are discussing the types of project management life cycle. Now this topic is basically something which you would study when you are starting off your project management studies, your studies for the PMP certification or the CAPM certification. So this is basics of project management, to be frank. And the first link in the description below is going to take you to an article on the relevant topic over at our official website pmclounge.com. So if you're into reading articles, check that out. Second link is going to be a playlist of all the concepts that you should know when it comes to the basics of project management. We also have a free 1.5 hour training video, which is your gateway to the world of project management. That will be linked in the third link in the description below. So that is called PM 101. You can check that out as well. That being clear, that being said, let's get started and understand the different types of project management life cycle. Now, to begin with, what exactly is a life cycle? All projects follow a certain pattern of work. How are you going to work to deliver the project, right? So you have a certain pattern that is followed. These patterns are known as life cycles. So deciding the life cycle or the pattern of work that your project is going to follow determines the way you would deliver your product, service, result, or whatever is the end result of the project, right? It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a specific result, performance improvement, whatever. How do you deliver that depends a lot on your pattern of work. Do you want to deliver everything at once, or do you want to deliver small pieces of the work, right? Small pieces of the product in several iterations. So how do you plan to work? Your pattern of work is what a life cycle really is. So let's look at the different types of life cycle that you can follow, the different patterns of work that you can follow for your project. The first one is predictive life cycle, also known as classical project management, the waterfall model, or fully plan driven life cycle. So this is plan driven life cycle, plan driven pattern of work. So your project schedule, scope, and cost is defined in the beginning itself. So you have defined what the schedule is going to be, what the cost is going to be, what the scope of the project is going to be. You have all that defined right in the beginning of the project itself. Now, there's a common saying around this life cycle, the predictive life cycle or the waterfall model, and that is plan the work and work the plan. So first of all, you plan everything that needs to be done and then you do it based on your plan. Now, everything is decided upfront in the beginning itself, right? And the plan is ready. So the project team puts its best effort to ensure that this plan is executed, this plan is followed, which was defined in the beginning itself. Now, the problem arises when there are changes. 2 months into the project, if you encounter a change, what will its impact be on the plan? What will its impact be on the schedule, scope, cost, right? So change is something which is going to cause an impact in predictive life cycle or the waterfall model, because your plan might change because of this, well, change, right? So this is how a typical predictive life cycle would look like. You will first work on your requirements, then you will complete the design. If you have any feedback for requirements, you can go back as well. Once you're done with design, you then go to implementation. If there are changes, you might have to go back to design as well. If there is nothing, no change required, you go back to verification and then maintenance, right? So this is how predictive life cycle work. Notice how requirements need to be complete before you can move to design. You cannot just have a part of requirements complete and then design for this part only while you work on the remaining requirements. That's not how it works. So that means one phase, let's say the requirements phase, should be 100% complete before you move to design. So that's how predictive life cycle works. You are basically predicting the entire plan of your project in the beginning itself, and then as you move forward you work that plan. A quick reminder here, youtube.com/pmc lounge/playlist. This is where the gold is. All the topics are neatly distributed and divided in playlists. All the knowledge areas are divided. Check the playlists out. That is where, like I said, the gold is. Okay, let's talk about adaptive life cycle. This is also known as change driven life cycle, which means as opposed to the predictive life cycle, we are being more welcoming to changes here. We are okay with introducing changes and taking in changes, accommodating them and working on them. In predictive life cycle, you have a plan, and one change has the potential to disrupt the entire plan and change its cost, schedule, or scope of the project. But here in adaptive life cycle, we are welcoming changes, and how we are doing it is by performing all the project activities several times in the course of the project. And each time we perform all the project activities, we deliver a small piece of the project. So you saw how in waterfall we would do requirements, design, right? And in the end, we would deliver the entire product. But here in adaptive life cycle, we would do all those phases, the requirements, design, everything, and we would deliver a piece of the project. And then we would go back, take the feedback and go back and start from requirements again and deliver another piece. These pieces are known as increments. So it is important to note that agile is based on delivering valuable increments to the customers as soon as possible. So when you're following agile way of delivering the project, you are not going to make the customer wait till the end and deliver the entire product. What you're going to do is you're going to deliver small pieces or small increments of the product to the customer as soon as possible. Take his or her feedback, incorporate that feedback, and in the next iteration, deliver another increment. So that's how adaptive life cycle works. A couple of pointers here. Since the life cycle is repeated several times, the changes can be easily accommodated in the next iteration because you're repeating all the steps, all the activities, or all the phases several times. So if there is a change in the next iteration, you can accommodate that change. So as opposed to predictive life cycle, when you have your entire plan chalked out in the beginning itself, here you are only planning for possibly the ongoing iteration or the next iteration. That's all. And based on the feedback, you are then making changes. So when you deliver an increment to the customer or the piece of the project to the customer has an opportunity to suggest changes and you have an opportunity to accommodate those changes. But at the same time, the customer also has the opportunity to provide feedback, and you also have the opportunity to incorporate that feedback. The feedback and the change could be as big as changing the entire scope of the project itself, and you should be okay in incorporating it because you did not plan out the entire project in the beginning. You just planned for one or two iterations and you worked on it and you delivered a certain increment, a certain piece of the project, and the customer was able to tell you what he or she thinks of it. So this is how adaptive life cycle works. You do a plan for the increment, you do your design, you build, you test, you review, and you launch a small piece, an increment of the project. This increment goes to the customer provides his or her feedback, and then you plan again, you design again, you build, test, review again, and you do a launch once again. This is an the second iteration, right? This is on top of the first one. So that's how you keep on repeating your sprints or repeating your the entire life cycle, and that way you are able to accommodate changes much more easily. All right, let's talk about iterative life cycle. So this is actually closer to predictive life cycle. Now you might think iterative sounds like repetition. How can that be closer to predictive life cycle? So although there are iterations, and these iterations are used to accommodate changes in scope, cost, or schedule, or whatever, the project team still tries to plan as much work upfront as possible. So you are still doing all the planning, you are still making sure that as much work as possible is planned upfront for the entire project, not just for the ongoing and upcoming iterations. You're planning as much work upfront as possible for the entire project. The approach here is to develop basic functionality or the minimum viability, right? Some projects call it the MVP feature, the minimum viable product feature. So you you want to create that basic functionality, you want to create that minimum viability of the product of the project in the first iteration itself, and then in the subsequent iterations you can further add product features. So let's take a look at the example. This is how iterative life cycle works. You created the minimum viable product feature in the first iteration itself, and then you went ahead and you added more features as time, cost, and schedule permitted. Right? I'd like to repeat here, the approach is to develop the basic functionality or the minimum viability of the product in the first iteration. The subsequent iterations can then add further product features. So this is how iterative life cycle looks like. Remember, you are delivering the entire thing, the basic functionality in the first iteration itself. Okay, let's talk about the incremental life cycle. This is closer to adaptive life cycle. Now, small usable pieces of the project or small usable increments are delivered to stakeholders, and these stakeholders could be your sponsor, your customer, any other key stakeholders. So you are delivering small usable increments to them, and they are providing you feedback. So you can incorporate that feedback in the next iteration. Now here it should be noted that these increments must be combined in the final iteration, because unless these increments are combined, you will not be able to produce the final product of your project. An iteration in itself could be complete but might not be of much use when it is standalone. What do we mean by this last line? Let's take a look at the next slide and you'll be able to understand it. Okay, so this is how an incremental life cycle looks like. These are all increments, and you need to combine all the increments in the end to produce the final product. An iteration in itself could be complete. This in itself could be complete, but it might not be of much use when it is standalone. So this, although is complete, it doesn't have any changes moving further, but in itself, when this is standalone, it might not be of much use. So this is how incremental life cycle looks like. Finally, let's talk about the hybrid life cycle, and this is exactly what its name suggests. It is a combination of predictive and adaptive approaches. So what you are going to do as a project manager, it is your responsibility to decide what would work best for your project. Would adaptive approach work best? Would predictive life cycle work best? Would iterative or incremental or some combination of these is going to work well for your project or your organization? As a project manager, you need to make that decision. You are the key player here in making this decision. So if you are looking for a combination of all these approaches, that is where you are looking at a hybrid life cycle. And here's the question for this video. Which life cycle do you use on your real life projects? Let me know in the comments below. Definitely looking forward to your answers. So that's all that we had in this video. Smash that like button if you got value out of it. It helps us stay motivated and create more free content for you. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified whenever we upload new videos. Also, don't forget to check out the website pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP resource.